Welcome back to the Happy Hormone Club podcast. It's International Women's Day. So awesome. We're talking about a great topic that we feel more women need to know about. And so today we're going to talk all about what you need to know about perimenopause. We're going to be answering the top 5 questions about perimenopause. And this is a topic that is starting to, luckily, thank goodness, getting more attention. But the truth is many women out there are struggling with sleep, anxiety, hair loss, brain fog because of all these hormonal fluctuations that are occurring, and they aren't getting a lot of answers from their practitioners. So we are here to have these important conversations to make you feel less alone, less crazy, give you some answers, some peace of mind. So here we are. So welcome. And I'm Angela Rocchio, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, Danielle Ziz.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, there's something very serendipitous about it being International Women's Day on the day of recording. And just like having a conversation to empower women, especially during a time that can feel so disempowering in its own way. There's so much that goes on during the transition into perimenopause. And today we're going to chat a little bit about what's going on and like why that is happening. But for such a long time, it seems that there was just like not a lot of education on this topic. And so women would be experiencing these symptoms and these frustrations and all of a sudden not feeling like themselves anymore, but they're not in menopause yet and not really understanding that their hormones are shifting. And mind you, if you've had stress, if you've got other imbalances going on, these transitions can feel like a lot more exaggerated and the symptoms can feel a lot worse for some than maybe for others. So it's hard to feel like normal, if you will, and then going to your doctor and not really walking away with any clarity. So yeah, there is something that feels really special about today, just it being International Women's Day. And even though this isn't the first episode of the Happy Hormone Club podcast, the first one was more introductory, like talking about the vibe for the podcast. But this is where we're really getting into some of the good stuff. And yeah, it's just really exciting. And I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Me too.
With a badass woman like yourself. If I may.
Yeah, back at you. And it's an important time in our lives because we have, most of us for the past decade or two, we've been, having children and raising kids and being a part of this really fast-paced world that we live in, and maybe advancing our careers, all of those things put together. And what happens in that, right? And we have aging parents, is that we tend to lose a little bit of ourselves, and we're not really giving ourselves the energy and the attention that we deserve. And so oftentimes that can propel us into an early hormonal havoc situation or early perimenopause or menopause. So such an important topic. Let's dive in. So how do we know when we're in perimenopause, right? That's one of the biggest questions that we hear from our clients. So let's dive in.
Yeah. And I remember the first time we were really chatting about this, like years and years ago on the Adrenal podcast with Dr. Holly German. We were talking about perimenopause, and it just hit me when she said it can be a 10-year journey, sometimes more than 10 years, depending on the person. Because I guess, and I was so much younger at the time, but I guess I just thought it went from A to Z. But of course it doesn't go from A to Z. You don't just go into menopause and all of a sudden you don't have your period for a year.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of awareness of what's going on, how that transition looks. But to understand that could be like a decade of hopefully a slower and steady transition, but for a little bit more aggressive. And that's where we tend to get like more symptoms, or it's not aggressive, but the transition is happening on top of other hormonal imbalances that were already in place. And that's where we get like more exaggerated symptoms, or symptoms that are like really uncomfortable. And we're like trying to figure out what's going on, and all these different things contributing to one another.
Yeah, it can happen as early as in your 30s, which is, crazy. And there's this like pocket of time between like where I'm in my 40s, where we didn't hear about perimenopause, wasn't even a thing. It's just starting to get its name. So we just thought, menopause. And I think of that as, that's in your 50s. I got time. Oh, wait, the changes have already started.
And it's actually such a beautiful time. It's such a beautiful time to have awareness about what's going on with your body, because if you can start now, especially with some of the stuff like building a lifestyle and a foundation that is like supportive, not only for the hormonal stuff going on, but for just like longevity and good health down the road. Like this is the time to build these habits, especially like you mentioned it before, Angela, and I feel like this is so important. We've been busy moms, we've been caregivers, we've had careers, all of these things that we've been managing. And it's so common. We chat about this with our clients like every single day at the Happy Hormone Club. We are at the bottom of the priority list. People are coming in at the bottom of the priority list with these symptoms that are frustrating. And it's hard to start putting yourself first and taking time for yourself when you haven't for so long. It's been like a challenge for so long. But if we can start doing that now, and we start laying this framework where we are making ourselves more of a priority, because it's just so important, because it becomes so much harder to do when we're older. Mm-hmm. I think about my grandma, like when, like you want to have the muscle mass and like the healthy bones and like the healthy joints. You want to have worked on that for 30 years prior, not like trying to reverse the process down the road when you're already having issues. Do you know what I mean? So this is why it's the perfect time. We have the space. We often have the ability to make a big impact on how things are going to look down the road. And I think that's what's really empowering and cool about doing it now.
Definitely.
Plus, we want to feel good now. It's our one life to live. Make it vibrant and the best it can be. Yes.
Not wait any longer, put our lives on hold for everybody else. Let's start putting our own oxygen max on first. And yeah, totally agree. And I think we also start to feel a lot of like guilt and blaming ourselves for kind of the things that we created, the patterns. And I think that we also like this, and also the symptoms that we're feeling. I don't know, we start to, because we haven't understood perimenopause, it's like we start to blame, and there's shame and all these things around it, that we're not doing enough, we're not motivated enough, we're lazy or whatever. And it's no, this could be totally hormonal. A lot of these things are hormonal, or your energy levels are being affected by various things. And I think it's time for us to give ourselves back the power and the confidence. And it's just exciting. We're here to like really just help you all give yourselves back like the power, as well as like just the compassion for yourself to like, and give yourself this time. So yeah, super exciting. So yeah, so oftentimes you're in perimenopause. How do you know you're there? This is going to be like irregular periods, right? Your length of the period of your cycle might change. The flow might change and shift a little bit. You might skip one altogether. And ovulation is less predictable. And again, we said this can happen as early as in your 30s. So just keep that in mind. And we can even start to experience some of those, you know, typical menopausal symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats. They can be maybe light at the beginning and tend to get more intense as time goes on. We have those less common symptoms, which can be that extra weight around the abdomen. We have anxiety creeping in. Our sleep is starting to be affected. We have insomnia, or we have trouble. We have fragmented sleep and lighter sleep. We're having maybe poor digestion. We're noticing that our list of foods that we can eat seems to get smaller, where we're having allergic reactions to certain foods, or we don't feel good after certain foods, or we're not staying regular, things like that. So those are all symptoms that we don't necessarily attribute to hormones, right? Or perimenopause.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting because there's so much hormonally that we could get into. And I feel like that could probably be its own episode, just like talking about the hormonal stuff from different angles, because it's not just like your sex hormones are slowly transitioning, right? There's because of the symptoms that tend to arise as our hormones transition. So for example, as our estrogen naturally declines during perimenopause, we might have increased like difficulties with sleeping. And then when we're not sleeping as well, it makes us more insulin resistant. So then we're not using glucose as efficiently or effectively as maybe we used to before. And this is just one example of kind of like many of the storm of like hormonal stuff that goes on with perimenopause and as things naturally transition. But you're not sleeping as well. You're more insulin resistant than you were before. And then you're having all these cravings, and then it just leads to an increased situation where your body's already changing the way it stores and holds on to fat and wear. And then you have this other stuff going on below the surface for other reasons, or due to the symptoms that you're having that contribute to it. So it becomes like a vicious cycle.
It'd be like a storm. Yeah, exactly. So it's also connected too. So it made me think of, and even that affects your poor sleep, affects your ghrelin and your leptin, right? Making you more hungry for the bad foods, and leptin not being able to tell you that you're full and satiated. And so it really is this sort of thing that builds on top of each other. And we don't want to make you feel overwhelmed by saying that, but just saying there's so many connections that we want to talk about and bring light to, because that is the information that you all need to hear. And the cool thing is that we have programs like the Happy Hormone Method, our membership program, where we guide you through this process. If you want that support, that's what we do. And a lot of us just need a little extra support. And again, these habits have been on the wayside for a long time. So how do we get back into these healthy habits that are going to be supporting our mood, our energy level, our sleep, our digestion, all of those things? And it doesn't have to be as hard as you think it is. It's not as hard as we think it is. We just have to.
And I feel like we digressed. Like we went from one symptom to talking about like the slew of hormones that contribute. But did we get all the symptoms that we wanted to cover? Angela, did we hit them all?
I think we went through most of them. I think we're just doing a broad stroke today. So I think that's good.
Okay. And I think we did want to chat about what's the difference, and this might be clear at this point already, but like exactly what's the difference between perimenopause and menopause. And just for crystal clarity for everybody, perimenopause, you can think of like it's like the transition into menopause. And so menopause is when you haven't had your period for a full year. So you can imagine like at 11 months, I haven't had my period. I'm like, am I in menopause? Like not officially, because it hasn't been a year. So like technically, I guess you would still on paper be perimenopause, but so you can see how it's a transition and there's like different phases depending on where you are. And Angela mentioned this could be a decade-long journey, or we mentioned earlier, it could be a decade-long journey into hitting menopause, that point where you haven't had a period for 12 months or more. And so perimenopause is just the stage leading up to that.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I just saw the statistic of that an average age of menopause in the United States is 51. I thought that was interesting. Might surprise you a little bit. For me, it was a little bit surprising. I thought that number might be more like 55, but that was interesting to me.
I would have guessed 60.
Yeah. And I think that might have to do with, we talk about us being like this hormonal havoc we are in, like you mentioned earlier, Danielle, like in our 30s and 40s, and not being a little bit more like balanced, like we maybe should be, right? That we are pushing ourselves into an early perimenopause or menopausal state.
Yeah. And I will say too, like if you know us from our podcast before this one, the Adrenal Fatigue podcast, and our life before talking about perimenopause here at the Happy Hormone Club, we were all about the adrenal. We still are. We're never going to leave it. We love the adrenals. We're all about stress, the nervous system, and all of that contributes so much to this. But I have to say, technically on paper, and I didn't do the blood work at the time until the very end, but I was like technically in menopause, like in my 20s, because I was so burnt out. I hadn't had a period for a year. And truthfully, working in this realm, like we work with people who haven't had their period for months and months, and would look like, when you look at their hormones, like their progesterone and estrogen, their hormones were so low, like it could look like you are in perimenopause, menopause way earlier than what would be expected. And that's not always like true perimenopause or true menopause, right? It's like due to the major chronic stress influence behind the scenes. So I think that could be a huge contributor to our society having this earlier average of when actual menopause is. That's just my speculation, because that definitely can have an influence. But generally speaking, if you don't have the really advanced, like not really advanced, but like the chronic stress picture really contributing to suppressed hormones to the point where you wouldn't have your period and things are so suppressed, like in your blood work, typically we would see this transition starting around the age of 40. Given like the stats that we're looking at right now, the average age being 51.
Yeah, definitely.
So for some it's earlier, some it's later, of course.
Yeah.
But I hope that gives clarity.
Yes. Okay, so the question is, what can we do about it? How can we manage these perimenopausal symptoms we talked about? And so let's dive into that a little bit. And it's really all about creating new habits, right? It's all about learning how to shift from burning the candle at both ends and taking care of everybody else but ourselves. Stop skipping lunch, keep working,
Yeah.
or skip lunch because you're taking care of the kids, right? Those types of habits that I think we can all say we're guilty of, and really start to shift the way that we, respond to life. So we're talking about the nervous system here, right? Talking about the way that we sleep. What's our sleep routine, our sleep hygiene, right? What are we putting in our mouths? How are we digesting? So we've alluded to it a little earlier, but yeah, it's all about having this holistic view of hormones, like which we've been talking about for over a decade. And so, yeah.
Totally. I feel like the beautiful thing about this time, if there is a silver lining, is that it really almost forces you to start doing more for yourself, because it might be it might look like I have to do something for myself or I'm going to lose my marbles. But the way that I'm thinking about it is you become a bit more emotionally sensitive, or your tolerance is just lower when you've got this hormonal stuff going on, when you're not sleeping well, when you're looking in the mirror and you're feeling frustrated, like you're feeling like you might be doing all the right things, or the things that worked before and they're not working anymore. You feel like you have to do something for yourself because you're just not feeling great on all these different levels. I think that's what's interesting about this time of life, is that it really makes us become much more aware of that we're not feeling like ourselves anymore, or what do we need to do to feel like ourselves again and come back home. And we realize how maybe for a long time we've just been we don't even know how to do that anymore, because we've just been on the back burner for so long. Yeah. But the silver lining is it doesn't have to be meditating for an hour every day, saunas and spas, all that stuff is so nice, but it's just creating the foundations in your lifestyle so that each day and each week you are nourishing yourself and you're supporting your body with really good foundations. And like we said before, it's not just about the hormonal stuff and helping ease that transition, but it's about longevity and healthy aging, and being vibrant and healthy and mobile and limber, and be able to run around with our grandkids and our great grandkids as we get older, right? And so that's what this is all about. We want to build these foundations now so that we can just thrive from here on out.
Yeah, totally. Yes. And if we're in those earlier stages, if we're listening to this and you're in your 30s or early 40s, it's a time to really set yourself up to have an easier transition into menopause. And if you're already there, cool. It's not too late. It's definitely not too late. It's in time to really focus on having a movement and exercise plan, right? That caters to building and keeping that muscle and supporting those bones. And so that you're less prone to injury and things like that. Yeah. No matter what
and your
age
brain
you are.
too.
And your brain too, for sure. Thank you. Yeah. So again, it's just managing these things are just these little itty bitty tweaks in your day. Instead of having to feel like you have to overhaul your whole life, we like to say when we're working with our clients, it's these tiny little tweaks throughout your day, making these different choices throughout the day, they're going to have a bigger impact. So it's these little things that add up to a bigger thing, right? So yeah, and it's going to not only again improve the hormonal symptoms, it's also going to, for some that is mood, I'm thinking it improves, they all build on each other, right? It improves your mood. It lessens that anxiety that you might be feeling more of these days. It's going to help you sleep better. It's going to help you digest better. Yeah. Just really nourishing yourself with better food, with plenty of water. And how are you hydrating yourself? And so there's things that maybe we just haven't been taught about how to hydrate. It might not, depending on your exercise routine, just drinking water might not be enough. And so just these kind of little tiny tweaks to make sure that you're hydrating properly for your body type and your biochemistry and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what's really awesome about our happy hormone method. It's you learn the foundation and you can implement it at your own pace with the support of coaches, and you're going to get this full-on support as you integrate it. And then it's you walk away from the program and you walk away with just crystal clear clarity on, and just this backing that you're going to have that's going to support you moving forward into your life. You know what to do. And I think the beautiful thing about it is that for so long we've thought things had to be almost rigid. And I don't know if you've noticed this as well, Angela, but have you noticed that a generation or two above us, with our parents and maybe grandparents, that It's like that thinking of like low fat, eat less, do more. And it's almost like a perpetual diet once they hit perimenopause, menopause, because they're trying to do the things that worked before,
Right.
but
Yep.
it's not really working. But it's just like when it's not working, I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
And I feel like our generation too, it's just we think like I'm not doing enough because
Yep.
it's not working. But perhaps what we're doing is just not the right approach.
Yeah. I see
Yeah.
people. Yeah. Again, definitely that whole non-fat craze we had in the 80s, and just really focusing on a lot of people in the gym. And just, I see this at my Pilates studio, just a lot of people focusing on cardio and not doing the strength training and the resistance training and focusing on that. And so there's just a lot of information out there that we've been led to believe is the right way. And also, it's also different because in perimenopause, the priorities have to shift a little bit, and the thinking has to shift as we age, and like we've talked about with the bone density and with muscle mass and so on. So yeah, I think there definitely is a mentality, and I think that we're here to just like remind people that you need to take a holistic approach, and that what you've been told isn't always true. We're much more interested in people just eating real whole foods, right? Instead of having these really rigid diets, like focus on just nourishing your body with real food and maybe less packaged food. I'm kind of went
I know
off a
what you're
little bit. Yeah.
I know what
So
you're
you can,
saying though. I feel like when people listen to this episode too, you might feel hungry literally for what do I do? And this is truthfully, it's an introductory podcast to many more where we're going to go into more of the details on some of the specifics. But I hope today we're helping to bring some of the connections together and shining a light, because you might be new to Angela and myself and just getting to know each other, like shining a light on our approach to having more fun and like really easing up on the reins rather than gripping them tighter, and just creating a really like healthy foundation that supports all the things in the simplest way possible. Like we're not about creating anything more complex. Life is complex enough as it is, and Lord knows hormones are. So what can we do to really make things as straightforward and simple for all of you out there listening who need support and want more, craving more support in this realm? And that's really what we want to bring to you in this podcast series that we're on embarking on together on this
yeah, I love it.
beautiful, sunny International Women's Day.
Yes. I love what you said about how, that generation seems to want to think about doing more, how we're not doing enough. If things aren't working, we're not doing enough. And I'd like to just like completely reverse that thinking and shift that mindset to be like, actually, what we need to focus on is the fact that like our nervous system actually does play a huge role in hormones. They're deeply connected by the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, and we can't deny that. We have people come to us all the time that say, I've tried everything, but the nervous system and the mental emotional pieces. And that's why our programs are so successful, because people are doing that alongside the made possible supplementation that happens. They're doing the mental emotional work, they're doing the nervous system repair work while they're working on their digestion, with you and insulin resistance and all those things. And that's why together that it makes this beautiful, the puzzle comes together and they finally can see progress. And it doesn't have to be about doing more. It's just, again, those simple tweaks, those simple, like small little choices every day that really add up. And you're going to be surprised by that, right? You're going to think that it has to be harder than that, but it doesn't, honestly. When you're focusing on the right things, when you're focusing on mind, body, and spirit, and your own happiness and like joy, it's amazing what can happen. And again, also a little bit of the trauma stuff, which is never what people want to address, but sometimes it's part of the puzzle, and we do that too, and it's part of the Happy Hormone Club. So we like
Yeah,
to go from all angles.
definitely. And I just wanted to shine a light on that because I think that's so important, is because we don't necessarily think about like our histories and what we've experienced and how that weaves into like how we are, like our tendencies and the way that I like to call it, like our being, like the way that we are being every day. One of the things I do with myself is like, how do I want to be today? Do I want to be chill? I want to be relaxed? Because my tendency, if I really let myself go unchecked and I'm not doing all the things using my own tools, I can tend to go back down that route where I just want to be really productive and like work really fast and check things off and like control the day as much as possible, which is like rooted in my own like past learnings and stuff that I've been like working on, I'm thinking. But that there's so much freedom in untangling it, because it's not just having to check yourself all the time. It's just like freeing yourself from being that way. But just having, maybe you're getting a little too deep with it right
I love
now,
it.
but we should definitely have like more conversation about it. But like the more that you can work on yourself from all these different angles so that you can calm your nervous system and you can actually handle the day and your experiences and the ebbs and flows in life, like maybe a little differently, especially if you've been handling it in ways that don't feel all that healthy or sustainable, then that's what's really cool. And that's what I love. And I know you love it. You're like all in on this world and so amazing with helping people break through and shatter some of this stuff, Angela. It's so cool to come at this from all angles, like the food, the exercise, the sleep, the mindset, the trauma, the inflammation, and in the simplest way possible, but like freeing you from the clutches of these things that are making your life heavier and less fun.
Exactly. There's so much of that we could unpack, but the one thing I do want to say about that is that we think that these patterns that we have, that they're who we are, right? I'm an anxious person. I'm this. We label ourselves and we put ourselves in this picture, this trap, this vision of who we are, and we can't change it if we think that. But if we start saying, oh, actually, this is just the patterns I've learned, right? From maybe my parents or my teachers or whatever it may be, not to blame, not to play the blame game, but just to say, okay, cool, these are just things these are just patterns I've created, and I can create something totally different if I choose it, if I really want to create something different. If I want to create something different in my body, I want to have my mind be less racy. I want to stop feeling anxious. Instead of me, I am an anxious person because I feel anxious. That's just what I'm feeling in this moment, and not let it define who you are. So I just like to just end with saying that. And this part of the conversation with that is, it's not who you are, just part of what you've been choosing.
Love it. So I feel like we've really come full circle and like maybe a little scattered off in the universe a little bit in this conversation.
Not.
But welcome to our world, the world of Danielle and Angela. But yeah, I hope this conversation has been helpful to clarify some of the ins and outs of perimenopause, menopause, what it looks like generally, and what we hope it could look like moving forward to create just like a beautiful transition that is a lot more fun and like a lot more sexy and vibrant than maybe you ever imagined. That's our goal.
Yeah.
And is there anything else we wanted to cover today before we wrap things up?
I just think that I just want you all to know that we are going to be covering lots of topics, lots of important topics about hair loss and weight gain and sluggish energy and feeling overwhelmed, and that we're going to bring on some of our favorite practitioners that we work with in the collective. We're going to bring on experts that are going to support us in having these really rich, beautiful conversations, empowering conversations. So we hope that you'll follow and give us some 5 stars, because we're going to come bring you some awesome information and bring you some wonderful experts in this journey and on this podcast. And yeah, I think I guess this last question is, I feel this way forever. And I think hopefully we've given you that today, this idea that this empowered feeling that like you have control, you have the ability to change it. And yeah, maybe that starts today.
And if you would like to connect with us more and get access, we have a really awesome free checklist that you can download. It's a checklist for thriving in perimenopause and beyond, where we cover a lot more of the specifics of just some of the stuff we just touched on today, but giving you a little checklist of some of the things that you can do every day and every week to help get the ball rolling in the right direction. So that'd be an incredible place to start. If you want a little something more today, head to the link in the show notes for our perimenopause checklist.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for your wisdom today. So fun to have this conversation with you.
You too, Angela. Thank you. And so excited for the next one. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.